Hello, and welcome to Warhammer 40k's Grim History from the Beyond. I'm Zeckthar,
And I'm Yuksen.
and we are the chroniclers of all that was, and all that will be in the 41st millennium. We've seen the rise and fall of many empires, and this month we'll be discussing the stalwart first founding of the Imperial Fists.
Indeed. Well, we've come to the end of the month, and this week we will be doing our regular Q&A. So, Zeckthar, what's our first question? And where's the Corona?
Yet again, the Corona couldn't make it. I'm sorry for all of you dear listeners who are wondering at this point probably, who is this mythical Sacrona? we're beginning to wonder that ourselves. But if you do enjoy video games and watching, especially like kiddie video games like Nintendo stuff, like Mario Kart, Smash Brothers, Pokemon, stuff like that anyways, Sacrona does a live stream. He normally is on Friday through Monday. So if you want to check out his channel, feel free. He's very good at his job. Unfortunately, he will not be joining us this week. And
he started, I'm not sure if he started doing live streaming of Space Marines 2 or not, but he started getting into that. And today he did a stream on, he's really getting into the Warhammer 40k. He's painting Storm Boys right now. So
yes, he actually hasn't been live streaming the Space Marine 2, which is kind of unfortunate, but it kind of makes sense because it's so new and the graphics are so good on it that he can't actually stream it and play it at the same time. Yeah. There's too much lag. That's really what it boils down to. He's trying to figure out how to fix that, but until then, anyways, unfortunately, sad day, no Space Marine 2 on his channel. But he does occasionally play the other Warhammer 40k game that is out right now that is very good, which is Speed Freaks. But anyways, the other sad news is we didn't really get any questions this month, but our good friend Hermes gave us so many questions last month that we couldn't actually go through all of them last month. So we have a boatload of them for this month. So once again, thank you, Hermes, for sending us so many questions. Now, some of these really out there and they're kind of difficult to answer, and we will try to answer them the best that we can, which starts with our very first one. Hermes says, I am confused as to how there is only human chaos Primarchs or Marines. Like the Tau and the Eldar don't get corrupted? Where is the Eldar Slanesh army? Now, I'm going to go ahead and let you answer, Yuksen, anyways, the whole Eldar thing. That's its own can of worms. But with the Tau just kind of, they don't deal with the warp all that much. There is this new kind of rumor of a Tau god that they met during the fourth dimension. Or not the fourth entity, fourth sphere of what is it called? The fourth sphere of expansion. Yeah. Where they tried going through the warp and it went so terribly wrong. They haven't tried it again. But during their time in the warp, they thought that they saw the Tau god, which it very well could be. It's not necessarily because of the common reason why gods are formed in the warp, which, as you know, Yuksen, that is because people worship them, or it's just they are gathering things from somebody's soul. So like if somebody feels anger or rage or something like that, that for a human anyways, that kind of gets funneled off to corn. Somebody anyways that is being licentious and lustful, that kind of gets channeled off to Slanesh. It's all the bad things anyways that people do. Contended for chaos. Now, if you're talking about other species, like for instance, another good example is Yuksen's personal favorite, and you can go ahead and describe this. Gork and Mork. How do they become as big as they have been? Yuksen?
Because all the orcs worship Gork and Mork, and the Wog energy itself basically generates and is fed to and from the two orc gods.
Right. Which is also, anyways, one of the main reasons why orcs really aren't tainted by chaos. There have been documentations where some are, but it's more like a probably the best way to describe it is more of like a mutual arrangement. And it's normally with core.
Yeah, so they aren't tainted. What they're doing is they're going, yeah, we can use you but will probably kill you very shortly.
And vice versa. It's almost actually, if they figure out, and it's rare by the way that this happens, but it kind of makes sense that the orcs would be kind of cool with Khorne, right? It's like, wait, you like fighting and killing? We should hang out, It's kind of my thought process.
And then after a few seconds, it's like, you guys enjoy blood too much.
Well, I think a lot of it also has to do with the fact, anyways. Well, first off, anyways, Khorne doesn't get really any of that energy, right? Because it just gets funneled back to Gork and Mork.
Yeah.
So he doesn't really get a whole lot out of it. And secondly, anyways, while he might admire the concept, anyways, of orcs, especially if you recall, right, that one orc that invaded his homeland, and he keeps reviving them every day. What's Tuska? Yeah,
Tuska, demon killer.
So he is amused by the orcs, but he doesn't really get any benefits from joining with them. And while he could give chaos infused powers to the orcs, it's just like they're going to go, sweet, thanks, and then they're going to go off killing, but he's not going to get really anything from that. So that's why the orcs
being killed off by the other orcs for not
right. So they don't meld incredibly well. But the rest of them, anyways, the orcs would be just. Could you imagine, anyways, Zinch trying to talk to an orc? Probably one of the funniest conversations ever.
Or Slaanesh trying to turn him. That would be horrible.
I'm just thinking, anyways, of Zinch, anyways. Like, so we have all these different mathematical theories. This orc is just sitting there, just kind of staring at him. It's like, right, when are we going to hit something? It's like, but that's why the orcs aren't involved. But now, I did mention, anyways, you're going to kind of discuss, anyways, the Eldar. But we've got we've got two other Xenos, anyways, that we kind of got to go across. The one that we honestly don't know a whole lot about, anyways, being able to be infused by chaos or not, is the Votann.
Well, they don't even use like warp travel either,
right? Which means they don't deal a whole lot with the warp. But at the same time, I think they've got a couple things going for them, anyways, for not being corrupted by chaos. One is they're all clones.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of is beneficial. And like you said, secondly, anyways, they're not really hugely involved with a warp. I can't even really see, and because they're space dwarves. Let's face it, they're space dwarves. So I don't really see. Which god is the one, anyways, has to do with greed? There's not a whole lot of them. Greed, which one is that? Okay, so you got Khorne, that's like war, violence, murder, killing, right? Then you've got Zinch, which is really just chaos, intelligence, wizardry, all that jazz. Then you've got Nurgle, change, yeah. Then you've got Nurgle, which is plague, and more plague. And then you've got Slaanesh, which is lust and all that jazz, anyways. Pleasure. I don't think any of them really actually connect with greed.
Well, in a way, I guess Slaanesh could be technically.
I guess actually all three of them technically could, other than Nurgle. Nurgle is just kind of Nurgle's Nurgle. You could kind of funnel it in that way, but I'm thinking more along the lines of, like it really feeds this deity. I don't know any of them that really do, which is kind of interesting. I might be wrong about that, but so I just don't think that they really have anything that the Chaos Gods really want. That's the other thing too. Now we've got one more, anyways, and then we'll get it to your Eldar here, and that's the Necrons. And anybody that's done any time studying the Necrons, Chaos really wants no part of that.
Right.
Chaos wants no part of that soulless, robotic mass that is the Necrons. Very much like, I guess the Tyranids too. We didn't talk about the Tyranids, but the Tyranids don't gel with the warp, and we will actually talk about that later. But right now, anyways, the Necrons, they don't really even like the warp. They've found ways to go through the warp, and their spaceships, the way that they travel, anyways, it's there are ways that they can use the webway, but it's incredibly dangerous, and they don't do it very often. And they've got I can't remember how else they can do faster than light travel, but I don't believe it has anything to do with the warp. Correct?
I'm not 100% sure on that. All I know is that they can't really be corruptible to chaos because, well, for one thing, they don't really have technically souls.
They don't have a soul to corrupt. Right.
So, you know.
Which, yet again, anyways, is the irritating part, anyways, of Lucius the Eternal. But he corrupted a Necron. It doesn't have a soul. Well, too bad. He did. All right. Well, anyways, go ahead, anyways, on your whole concept of why there aren't any Eldari Chaos armies.
Because, okay, so Slanesh was created through horrible pleasure stuff that the Eldari did. Put succinctly, if any Eldar actually turns towards chaos, their soul would be consumed by Slanesh. So, hence why it's known as the Great Devourer. So, really, they'd just be killing themselves. They wouldn't even be corrupted, they'd actually be killed. Yeah. The other thing about it is the fact that if because it'd also be drawing the Chaos God to a particular craft world, sometimes other Eldari will like kill them so that they will stop doing what they're doing. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean the Eldari are kind of, at this point, they're kind of the bane of chaos, right?
Well, Slanesh is just out to get them.
Well, I mean, what I mean by the bane of chaos is that there's no way that they'll ever actually join anything that is chaos because of that exact point. Slanesh, anyways, I mean,
yeah,
on their souls.
And
even if they tried to join,
didn't learn that well enough, the Harlequins do historical representations of it quite often.
Oh, with their dances. Well, I mean, okay, so yeah, well, Slanesh will eat their souls, but at the same time, well, here's, I guess, a different kind of way of asking this question. Why can't a group of Eldari join Khorne? I mean, surely Khorne, anyways, if you found them to be vicious enough, he would protect them from Slanesh, right?
No.
No? Why not?
Okay, let's put it this way. Then why hasn't a whole bunch of the Drukhari turned to Khorne then?
Well, they've refused to do so. This has nothing to do with Khorne. I'm just saying, anyways, what if there was, what if a branch of the Eldari decided that they were going to worship Khorne? Would Khorne actually protect them from Slanesh if it was worth his while? Or Nurgle? Nurgle, I think, would find it actually rather humorous. Nurgle actually makes a little bit more sense, too, because he's got that goddess in the back room. They're just like, well, we want to help her, so we'll help you.
Well, I think when it comes to that, the Eldari wouldn't want to anyways, since they have their whole, everything must look wonderful.
Right. I'm just thinking, anyways, that probably the answer to that is it would be too much of a hassle for the other gods.
Right.
That's the only thing I can really think of. I mean, could it happen? Sure. I mean, it's 40K. Anything could happen. But at the same time, anyways, if it did, it would be, I mean, it would definitely have to be a very hands-on pet project from one of the other deities, just to make sure that Slanesh didn't just, sneak in there and, eat up their souls. That's the other reason, by the way, to also kind of further into this question, anyways, is one of the reasons why humans are so adaptable to this is just simply because their souls have the biggest pull in the warp. That's why the Chaos Gods have been fighting over humanity, anyways, for as long as they have, is because their souls shine so bright in the warp, anyways, and to consume those, anyways, gives them more strength. But anyways, thank you for the question, Hermes. What's Hermes' second question, Yuksen?
How many Chaos Gods will there be in the future? I can count 8, 4 plus Malice plus Skaven God plus Emperor and Vashtor. Who do you think their lieutenants will be?
Well, okay, so the 4 he's talking about, anyways, we've just been talking about, which is Khorne, Tzeentch, Nurgle, and Slanesh. We did a Vox, actually, anyways, on the 4 gods of chaos. Well, actually, we called it the 5 gods of chaos because we also put Malice in there because technically he is also one of the major gods. He's just not talked about anymore. He is actually one of my favorites because the way that he actually gains power is by taking it from the other gods, hence his name, Malice. Now, the Skaven god, also known as the Great Horned Rat, we have actually looked through a bunch of different information. Anyways, he is actually not in the 40K universe. He is in the Warhammer Fantasy universe, and I believe the Age of Sigmar, correct?
Age of Sigmar, yes. I believe is what we found out.
Now, there is this concept that maybe, anyways, old Terra was Warhammer Fantasy. From the stuff that I've read, though, that's incorrect. There is this concept that maybe it was another one of the planets, anyways, that was around Terra that was kind of like Warhammer Fantasy, and that's where, that way they could kind of combine the two. But I have yet to see anything that actually does that.
Just wait; they'll figure out a way.
They probably will. Which, quite frankly, anyways, that'd be kind of cool because the Horned Rat I've always kind of found entertaining. He's the self-depreciating, self-destructive god of chaos.
There's actually a really funny YouTube video done by, I believe it's a YouTuber called No Man, where there's one of the Adeptus Custodes is brought to the Emperor. And they find out it is the Horned Rat. It's hilarious.
Entertaining. With your other couple of gods here. Okay, so first off, Vashtor. Let's start with Vashtor. Vashtor. Why don't you explain who Vashtor is?
Okay, so Vashtor, which we've actually mentioned before
a couple of times, yeah. We haven't really gone into depth, but
what's his name? The Petulant Child, Lieutenant. Hated by, was it basically the Petulant Child or first demon prince of?
Oh yeah, I can't remember. He's the one that helped Sean 2 last time when we were talking, right? With the Battle of the Phalanx. Yeah, I can't remember his name, but I can look it up for you while you're talking about Vashtor.
So Vashtor is the ruler of the Forge of Souls. He was created. Some claim he's a demon god, but the way that he's created was through desires of inventors, engineers, artisans, scientists, and went past the extremes. And because of that, he was actually created in the Materium, which begs the question too, since by my definition of what a demigod is somebody who's created who's mortal with god blood, basically. He appears to be created in the warp.
So what we found with him, by the way, anyways,
we think he's a minor god,
right?
Who's trying to become one of the major gods.
Yuksen,
yeah.
The guy that the name you're looking for, by the way, is Bellicor. But yeah, Vashtor. They all ended with or. Vashtor, like you said, anyways, we kind of looked into this quite a bit, actually. He is always kind of referred to as a demigod. Now, and then we, like you said, anyways, we kind of looked into what a demigod is. From all the research that we've done, anyways, it is, like you said, anyways, it's either it's someone with godlike powers that is like almost like half god but half mortal, or they're like a minor god, right?
Yeah.
So I would probably place him more because if I recall right, he does live in the warp, correct? Or the Imperium. So I would probably put him as a minor god of chaos.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, there are a couple others.
Well, there are many unknown chaos gods.
I mean, they always say that, but I mean,
they're getting smaller and smaller number though because they keep trying to piss off Gork and Mark.
Or the other chaos gods, but yeah, there are 3 in particular, anyways, that are kind of a little bit more old school. There's Ansel, Monarch, and Fraz Etar are known as minor chaos deities. There are some Chaos Space Marines that are rumored to praise them by putting different types of spikes on their power armor. So there are a few more, anyways. I wouldn't call them major chaos gods, though. Neither would I call Vashtor major chaos god. At this point, I would say there are 5. But actually, Hermes, your question was just simply, anyways, how many chaos gods will there be in the future? Well, I think you kind of hit the nail on the hammer there, Yuksen. There's a plethora of them in the warp. So who knows? It could be boatloads. They just haven't brought them up yet. We just know that there are pretty much the big five, and then Vashtor is a pretty important demigod, especially because he runs the forge.
Yeah,
the forge, which is
he's
pretty important. But
he's
the last
despised by the four major gods. At the same time, they're just like, we'd love to squish him, but we kind of need him.
exactly. Now, the last guy you talked about, and we wrestled about this for quite a bit. Oh, and you also said, who do you think the lieutenants will be? Well, I think a perfect fit for Vashtor's lieutenant would be Be'lakor. What do you think, Yuksen? I think they would just get along so smoothly.
You failed for the last time. We're putting you underneath Vashtor.
No!
Grow up. You've been around for thousands of years.
Well, yeah. So for Vashtor, I think, anyways, it would probably be for his lieutenant. I'm thinking it'd be somebody that he actually creates, like a demon forged entity.
Right.
That's who I honestly think it would be. Either that or some heretic that gets along with Vashtor, which wouldn't shock me. I just, quite frankly, anyways, the Mechanicum is one of those things that, well, I know quite a bit about them from like the 31st millennium and kind of their concept of how they do things. Quite frankly, I've kind of tried to steer away from them as much as possible because I really don't like them. They're idiots, in my opinion. We follow logic, except for none of it is logical.
Yeah, it's their logic.
I could get on a tangent about the Mechanicum, but I won't. Because we do have to talk about this last one that both Yuksen and I really actually got into a pretty interesting conversation about. So the last god that you mentioned anyways is the Emperor, Chaos God. And that kind of left a sour taste in my mouth. I'm not going to lie. We did some research on it, and I would say, no, he is not a Chaos God. He has the potential to become a Chaos God. That's, right. I think, really the key thing. And, okay, so this all goes back to... Go ahead, Yuksen.
And he almost did become one.
Right. Why don't you explain that?
So, at one point, the Chaos Gods had manipulated him enough to think that the only way, basically, to stop Horus was to become a Chaos God. And then, I believe, Person,
yes.
ended up talking him out of it. And so he was going to, but then before he did, he was brought back down to Earth. Ha, ha, ha.
We've got sad jokes. Yeah. The entity that you're referring to, anyways, has been known as the Dark King. And it represents the drive to complete destruction without reason or aim. Okay, so originally the concept is that the Dark King was probably going to be Horus himself, or it could have been the greater demon Samus. But then in the end, they're like, you know what? It's probably the Emperor. The reason why is, like you said, anyways, on the Vengeful Spirit, he thought the only way that he could kill or defeat Horus was to garner more warp energy. And when he did that, anyways, he started bringing in all that stuff, anyways, that he wasn't supposed to bring in. And in doing so, he actually killed all the custodies around him. And the only reason, anyways, he was able to walk himself off of that was because old son Person showed up, anyways, and was just like, "This isn't you, Emperor," and he, came back to being the Emperor. There is this concept, though, that the Dark King, anyways, will eventually show up, and he will become the 5th or 6th god of chaos. Now, the question of the day is that really the Emperor?
Right.
At this point, if it is, he's going to be a sad little chaos god because there's not much left of him, anyways, on that golden throne. Which got us into, anyways, looking into the kind of the rebirth of the Emperor, which is known as the Soul Child. Now, okay, so we are
Child or Star Child?
Star Child. You're right, Star Child. Now we are kind of tiptoeing onto the hypothetical here, so bear with me. A lot of this, anyways, is hearsay and just talk. But the concept of the Star Child is that this is very much like the birth of the Emperor with the 100 shaman that gave up their souls to become the Emperor. This is kind of the same concept in what it kind of. what it is that when the Emperor loses the last bit of himself on the Golden Throne, what is the last ditch thing anyways is going to sail off to, there's a child out there in the universe that is his rebirth as the Emperor again. Now, if this happens, the concept is that he will be the Emperor reborn. And in that case, anyways, if he becomes a Chaos God after that, who knows? Like I said, this is all very hypothetical and a little bit out there. But I don't know if I would, at this point anyways, actually call him a Chaos God yet. I think anyways, there was a chance that he could have been. And he was very close, and he pulled himself off from the brink, or back from the brink. But what do you think, Yuksen?
I don't think he is the next Chaos God.
Why?
Because there's so many other ones that they could pop out, and also because once he dies, everything's going to fall into ruin anyways, pretty much is the way that they have it set up right now.
Mm-hmm.
So it wouldn't make sense to have him pop up as a Chaos God.
Okay, but if he does, I think it would be kind of an interesting story on the concept of, because if he does, that means Lehman Russ is going to come back. So remember, Lehman Russ is coming back anyways at the time of what is it? He's coming back pretty much at Ragnarok. I can't remember what he called it. It's like the time of the Great Wolf, or had something to do with a wolf because he's a space wolf. But
yeah,
I could imagine anyways. It would be kind of interesting anyways. Probably his most faithful son anyways ends up killing him at the end. It'd be very much like X-Men 3. And this sounds terrible now to think about it, but X-Men 3 anyways, the end of the Phoenix saga, where she's like killing everybody. The Wolverine comes up and he ends up stabbing her. I can kind of see that, but
horrible choice.
I know it's a horrible choice, but you see anyways the similarities, right? I could take a bad movie and use similarities for it. But yes, it was a bad movie. Thank you for that question, Hermes. We're on to the next one anyways. Oh, which we kind of actually just answered. Did the Emperor cast part of his soul away so it could come back when he turned into a Chaos God? Like we said before anyways, the concept is that it will be the reborn Emperor. Now, what that ends up becoming, if he becomes a scion for humanity or if he becomes a Chaos God, that is so far in the future at this point. I do not care to speculate on it, quite frankly, other than our terrible rendition of X-Men 3 and Wolverine and Lehman Russ. But that was my 2 cents. What do you think, Yuksen? You got a better movie that you could...
No, I was thinking about it, but I can't think of anything right off the bat, so...
Maybe Deadpool? Nah. Moving on anyways to actually your next question, Hermes. If warp feeds on vices and all humans have to be drafted to fight against Xenos or Chaos, wouldn't their selfless act purify the warp?
No.
Moving on. Well, no. Okay, hang on. We should probably go a little bit more in depth on that one. Don't you think, Yuksen?
Okay, so the reason why would be the fact that, yes, it wouldn't be necessarily feeding the warp, but it wouldn't be purifying it either. It's like, okay, the person isn't reveling in blood and gore or hatred. Well, that just means that they aren't contributing to Korn. That doesn't mean that they're going, we are purifying you because we aren't doing anything that feeds you.
Well, it's not just that. I mean, okay, you just mentioned anyways, Korn. So here's the thing. Let's go to Cadia, right? Where they fought anyways the forces of Abaddon. They're still fighting. Right. They're still warring.
Right.
Doesn't that still feed Korn?
I believe so.
So even if they're doing it with the purest of heart and the nobility of humanity in their footsteps, they're still warring. So I think that's the big crux of the whole thing. The other thing though is that humanity,
or Zench is the god of change,
right?
Well, that in itself,
it's also I gotta look up a poem here real quick that kind of explains what I was just talking about fairly well. But it's also, it's not just because they're fighting for the right reason doesn't mean anyways that human, whoever he is anyways, is pure of heart. Far from it. Even
Right.
if, okay, let's even use anyways the example that I just used anyways. They're still warring, so therefore it focuses on Korn. Let's say that isn't true because they are fighting against Korn. They're fighting against chaos, so
Okay.
therefore they're fighting against Korn. Let's just say that pushes them away from that aspect. At the same time, all those people, anyways, that are fighting against Korn, it's not like they're good or pure of heart. There are very few, anyways, in the Imperium that could even boast to try to make that claim. And those ones, anyways, you even look at it and you're like, no, you're fallible still. You're human. It's part of being human is you're fallible. So I just don't.
I was just thinking of Inquisitor Theodore. It's like, I'm pure of heart. Get out of my way before I shoot you. You're wasting my time.
So getting back to anyways that whole pure of heart and corn thing, anyways, is I'll take a poem quote anyways by a guy that I really like actually, Ernest Hemingway, and it is there is no hunting like the hunting of a man, and those who have hunted armed men long enough and liked it never care for anything else thereafter. It's a very dark quote, but still, Warhammer 40K really personifies this. You have all these different, I mean, there is only war in 40K. It's the only reason, by the way, the Imperium actually hasn't just imploded on itself. If nothing was attacking the Imperium, it would cease to exist, in my opinion, because they would just start killing each other.
Right.
So it's just there's no way, I think, anyways, that you can purify the warp anyways through humanity's souls. They're just too corrupted.
Right.
So I think we answered that. But okay, so this one I think you're going to actually find fairly interesting, Yuksen. How do the Sisters of Silence nullify abilities compared to the nulling of the Tyranids? So for anybody who doesn't know anyways, the Sisters of Silence, they're all blanks, correct?
Yes.
And
they
a
all
blank
have
is
the pariah gene.
the pariah gene. For also for those who don't know what blanks are they're literally null of the void, correct? That's the best way to describe it.
They produce a sphere of energy that negates the warp within that energy, or also, as we have found out or suspected, it also somehow affects Tyranid hive mind.
Right. So, okay, so why don't you explain anyways real quick for the people anyways the difference between the two, because there is actually a difference.
The warp basically, first of all, psychic abilities within that sphere around the blank don't work, period. So, like, if you're to shoot arc of lightning at somebody that's within that sphere, it's just going to fizz out and not do anything. Also, if a demon or warp entity is also within that sphere, they're like a concealment ability wouldn't work, or also they can actually be harmed. An example of this would be in one of the Caiaphas Cain recordings where Jurgen gets close to this demon that had been like shot and sliced at and nothing was really happening. But as soon as he got close to it, not only did it, when it bumped into it, feel like it was being seared, but some carsmen showed up and were actually able to send it back to the warp by annihilating its body.
So, probably the best way to describe that is it literally breaks their connection with the Immaterium if they're within that bubble.
If they're within that bubble, basically it renders their abilities useless and their resiliency, I guess is the way to put it, caused by being a warp entity.
Okay, so does it actually break their connection with the Immaterium?
Well, if they die, technically they're sucked back into the Immaterium, aren't they? Technically.
Around a blank, I don't know. I don't know if they just cease to exist. Okay, well, actually, okay, here's a question, I guess. So if you could, like, put, like, a demon, a demonette or whatever, anyways, okay? You put it in chains, and so it can't get out, and then you put a blank right next to it. What happens to the demon? Does it eventually just dissipate into nothingness? Because a demon can't survive too terribly long, anyways, outside of the Immaterium without being connected to the Immaterium.
Unless they have, like, a host body or...
Right. So would it just start to dissipate, or would it just sit there in pain or confusion? Or
I don't know. I truly don't know.
I don't know either, because quite frankly, I don't think that anybody's actually, well, somebody probably has tested that in the Imperium of Man, but I haven't looked into it.
Probably because it's the Inquisition.
Right.
And it's buried somewhere along with records on Tiberius the Redwig.
Right. But regardless, anyways, it does tend to shear their link between the immaterium, so they can't, like you said, anyways, they can't use their psychic abilities. They can be hurt. They can, and they also, if I recall right, anyways, they literally can't see the blank. Right? It's almost like there's this blind spot. They know it's there. They know that there's a blind spot there, but they can't see what it is because it's so null. It's just, to me,
I'm not
always
sure
kind
if that's true or not.
well, at least anyways, okay, so from
I
my
don't think they can identify a particular being as being a null.
what?
So it's not like they can go, oh, that's a null right there. Because the fact that in the situation I was talking about.
Oh, so what you're saying is that they can see them, but it's not like, and they know that there's something anyways wrong. They're stuck in something anyways that doesn't make any sense, but they can't actually tell what's actually doing it.
Right.
Okay, because I remember anyways with Cyphus Cain when I think it's the same thing you're talking about anyways, when the demon shows up on the bridge of that ship and he's there with Jurgen, and this demon is causing all sorts of havoc and mischief and it's killing everybody, and then Jurgen comes up with his what is it? He uses a Melta, right?
Right.
He comes running up anyways, and the demon all of a sudden looks like really confused, and it's looking around and it knows something's wrong, but it can't really identify where whatever this thing is going wrong, and it starts trying to like slash out and try to attack things, but it's just completely and utterly missing Jurgen, who's like right in front of him, and then he blasts him with a Melta, and it really hurts the demon. But that's the whole concept anyways with how it works with anyways with warp entities.
The one now, that I was talking about was a Demon S. It's a different book. Okay. But actually the demon doesn't realize that he's a blank until she literally ends up hitting him. And it's almost, for some reason, it's almost like a searing pain. I don't know why.
But... Oh, interesting. Well, that's kind of how it works anyways with the warp. Now, how is it different anyways from the Tyranids?
The Tyranids, it is more of a... Well, one of the things about the prey gene is just somebody that has it in general, if you're near them, it causes discomfort. This normal person, it causes discomfort to begin with. Now, when it comes to gene stealer hybrids, that's much higher, for one thing. And then also they tend to apparently disrupt the hive mind, which can also, of course, cause them to stutter, because it'd be kind of like, you're having a constant conversation, and all of a sudden you don't have any information coming at all. That's going to stop you and go, what the heck's going on?
Well, especially for Tyranids, because if they lose connection with the hive mind, they just become pretty much primal, right?
Yeah. Which, for the ones that have the guns, the little ones with the guns, I think they're called.
Gaunts?
Yeah. I can't remember if they're Termagants or
Hermagants, yeah.
Their predatory action generally is to hide, whereas the ones with the claws,
the Gaunts,
their predatory instinct is to attack. But either way, there'd be a short time that any of them would be somewhat out of it for a while, because it'd just be like all of a sudden you can't hear anything. That's going to throw anybody off for a second.
Except for maybe lictors. Just lictors are weird though. They're the ones anyways that the hive mind has actually brewed them into being anyways to be able to act on their own. It's the whole concept behind the lictor.
At the same time, though, they do
have a connection, but it's very
faint. They do have a connection.
So I don't know if it would affect a lictor. Well, I know for a fact it wouldn't affect the lictor as much as a Gaunt.
Well, yeah.
But at the same time, anyways, I think it would affect it, but I don't think it would be as immediate, and it wouldn't be as destructive.
Well, I think it might be immediate. It might not last as long, though.
Right. I mean, like I said, lictors are weird. Lictors are ones, anyways, that are literally sent to like different planets, and they're the only ones there. So they
Yeah.
don't have, I mean, like for instance, Gaunts, they need, what do they call them? Tyrants or they warriors. They need bigger Tyranids around them anyways to help out with the hive mind
Right.
transfer. Lictors don't need any of that. So they're a little different. But anyways, I hope anyways that answers your question. They definitely blanks definitely affect both of them. Quite frankly, I think that warp entities are affected significantly more severely than the Tyranids are. But the Tyranids can also, I mean, the Tyranid, like you said, anyways, it's like your communications are all of a sudden just shut off.
Mind you, that's one of the things I don't like about the Tithes episode.
Oh, were you gonna get into that? Okay.
Well, the
Why?
only part that I was going to mention is the fact that why is it that there's like 20 lictors in one place? It
Yeah,
makes no sense.
they normally don't. There's normally not a bunch of them together.
There's generally normally like maybe 5 of them on a planet, separated way far away from each other.
Well, not only that, but lictors are actually they're pretty gnarly. They're
Yeah,
hard to take down.
they're
It's
like,
been known, anyways, entire regiments of Catashans being killed by a single lictor. So the way that just the standard soldier in that episode, anyway, just kind of like mopped through them was just kind of I was like, okay, you kind of did them dirty there a little bit, but I mean, don't get me wrong. When the Custodes starts fighting like 3 or 4 of them, definitely. Custodes could definitely take on 3 or 4 lictors. That with no problem.
right.
But just the random soldier, anyways, on the side that's just like mowing them down. I don't think so. But anyways, so I hope that answers your question there, Hermes. I do actually like this next one that you've got. Is there a race that's a minor race now, but you think they have the capacity to become one of the main races in 40K? What's a race you would like to see, or a faction inside of a race?
So I don't know of any particular race that could be brought out to be a major race unless they brought back like the squats, but they've been
But
kind of
remember, those
clear that
were
they don't want to.
well. They're also they're not aliens. They're what do
Oh
they
yeah,
call them?
they're abhuman. So yeah,
Adhumans. Yeah.
they don't count either. So
Well, that would be kind of interesting, anyways. If all the abhumans said, "You know what? Enough. We're tired of the Inquisition. We're tired of all of you guys, anyways, hating on us. We're doing our own thing."
and all of a sudden, all the ratlings and the ogrins
You
and
know,
the
and the squats and all the rest of it, anyways. They just decided to go off on their own. Well, that'd be kind of interesting. But you mentioned this actually a couple days ago when we were talking about this. We were thinking more along the lines of like a conclave of a lot of the minor species of Xenos.
coming
Kind of
together.
interesting. Yeah, coming together. Not very similar to what the Tau have, except for instead of like the Tau, where the Tau are, like the supreme group, and then they have a few, like Xenos underlings that work with them. This would be definitely very much like, well, actually kind of like Star Wars, The Old Republic, where you've got all sorts of different worlds with all sorts of different people. Like, for instance, the Terlians, the dog soldiers,
Yeah.
who did kind of have an empire, and then they got the crap kicked out of them by the Imperium. And I mean, they're still kicking around. They're not as
Not
big as they
many
used
of
to
them.
be. Yeah.
And then we would have Jokero could technically be there since they're only used sporadically
Right.
in the
Um,
Imperium.
and the Nikasar, that's the one you really wanted in there. The pancake polar
Pancake
bears.
And technically you could share the Kroots in there too.
Yeah, I
Because
mean, and technically both of those are part of the Tau Empire, but I could see, them becoming part of this conclave. That'd be kind of interesting.
well the Kroots are though a lot of them are mercenary. So yeah,
Right,
there's
right. So to me, anyways, that would be kind of interesting. And then adding, anyways, an aspect of part of that, anyways, actually like an aspect of humanity in there too.
right.
So you
Like
have
the
like
squats. No.
now. So, you've got like this burgeoning empire, and well, not even an empire. I'd probably call it like a republic or a conclave, where it's all these different species, and they literally, anyways, they come together and they're working for the single ultimate purpose, which is
destroying the Imperium.
the Imperium, exactly.
Because they've all been done dirty by the Imperium.
And I think, anyways, that could be a very cool army.
Like the Scythians and the...
Yeah. I mean, now, like Yuksen mentioned, anyways, Sakrona was talking about, or Sakrona just did a live stream, anyways, on painting some orc boys. The army, anyways, that I've always kind of wanted to paint, anyways, is actually, it's something of my own design, anyways, and I've always called it the Army of Solmus. The reason why is it's Trazine the Infinite's army. And anytime that you ever read about Trazine the Infinite, he never really goes into battle with just Necrons. He's got Tesseracts, anyways, that he kind of hucks out there, and he's got all sorts of different aliens and humans, anyways, that will fight for his cause.
Whether they want to or not, that is.
Yeah, true.
Because, let's face it, Inquisitor Greyfax was not a willing participant.
Well, she was a willing participant to fight against Chaos, but you couldn't shoot Trazine, which irritated her to no end. But yeah, anyways, that concept, anyways, of like a conclave or a republic, and their whole concept is like, we have been kicked around for so long by the Imperium. We're just done with this. We're done. I don't care, anyways, if you're a human, or a dog soldier. Just tired of the Imperium. We can work together.
Yeah.
We are stronger together. And it's all, but the thing that would make it even greater is that they all come together, anyways, under the Farsight enclaves. We're already against the Tau, So, I mean, it would all just kind of come together there, and they just become their own like republic. To me, that would be insanely awesome. I don't know. What do you think?
Other than the Farsight enclave part, I'd be on board.
Oh, what's wrong with the Farsight enclave?
Because I can't see them really being like, we need vengeance against humanity. In the Imperium.
Fair enough, but at the same time, I can also see them going, you know what? We're really small fish in a very big ocean. We could use whatever help we can get. And them kind of being almost like, like the sounding board for all these other races and stuff, anyways, that are just like, we should burn and pillage the next planet. It's like, well, hang on half a second. If you do that, the Empire is going to come down rather hard. See, this is why you didn't last all that long. We need to be very strategic about this.
That isn't necessarily true. Generally, they would just come by and during the Crusade completely annihilate the majority of us.
Well, okay, that's what happened with dog soldiers.
Yeah.
Well, no, actually both times, it was just all of a sudden like, oh yeah, these guys, burn them,
That was their general viewpoint when it came to most of the Xenos.
Well, okay, so we have, let's see, how are we doing on time here? We've got time for one more question. And this one I actually posed to you, Yuksen. I think this will be a very good one. Because we, as you know, anyways, we have been talking about the Imperial Fists for the last month. And last week, anyways, we actually talked about the heroes of the Imperium. And you talked about, even though you said you weren't going to, Alexis Pollux, and I talked about Sigismund. And one of the things that you kept asking was, why didn't he pick Yonad instead of Sigismund to lead the Retribution fleet? You asked that a couple of times. And as I was going through the editing and coming up with the video anyways, I actually came up with a better question that is along those lines. And it is, if Sigismund had actually led the Retribution fleet, how would that have changed the fate of the Imperium? Now, let's say for argument's sake that instead of Yonad, who dies anyways in the war, Sigismund doesn't. Okay?
It's like, it'd be a huge difference because Sigismund would be dead.
Yes.
And Pollux may not have even been there.
So, well, actually, that kind of begs the question. So, if Sigismund, okay, we're going to say, anyways, he doesn't die in the war, but he's still part of the Retribution fleet. He gets stuck out there. He's part of the Battle of Fall. He's going to have to run through the whole gauntlet that Alexis Pollux runs through. So, I guess the first question would be, anyways, do you think Alexis Pollux would actually be there? with the
First of
retribution.
all, I don't think he would try to stay at fall to begin with. Seasman. I think he'd be trying to get back.
Okay, well, let's start with the first question. So, first off, do you think that Alexis Pollux would even be with the Retribution fleet?
I don't know. He was Yonad's protege,
Right.
which begs the question: would he still be with Yonad, or I want to say he'd still be with Yonad?
Well, part of me would think that. The other part, though, is that, I mean, Rogel Dorn did send 3 Stonemen for a reason. I mean, he was very angry. He wanted to make sure, anyways, that the traitors felt his wrath. So he sent more than 50% of his Stonemen there with them. So I could see Alexis going, but at the same time, I agree with you. I think he could have also stayed behind. In which case, anyways, one of the other Stonemen, what was Ephron or Ephron
Reed.
or Freed? Yeah, sorry, Freed, anyways, would have joined Sigismund instead.
Okay.
So we're gonna split this into 2 different categories here. So let's go with the easier one first, anyways. Let's say Alexis Pollux doesn't join them; he stays with Yonad, right?
Right.
How would that do you think affect, anyways, the Siege of Terra? So real quick, anyways, we're gonna follow both these timelines, anyways, of Sigismund and Alexis Pollux. All right. We already know the outcome, anyways, of what actually happened if Sigismund stays behind. So if he doesn't stay behind, anyways, we're gonna go with the alternate universe. If Alexis Pollux stays behind with Yonad, how does this help the Siege of Terra, or does it?
Well, if he sent Ifrid, that means Alexis Pollux would probably take the place of Ifrid on the fleet.
You think he would do that, or do you think he would take the place of Sigismund and he would be part of the Battle of Pluto? Because you mentioned, anyways, I mean, his bread and butter for Alexis Pollux was void warfare.
Okay, then Yonad would take Ifrid's place, and then he would take Sigismund's. One or the other.
Okay, so how do you think that would have affected the Siege of Terra?
I think it would have changed it greatly. Having the fleet master there would probably be somebody who'd be more experienced than Ifrid with running the majority of the ships. So he may be able to have done a better job.
So Freed was he was the one that ran the second sphere, right? Or no. Okay, so the first sphere was Sigismund, the second sphere was Halbrecht, the third sphere was Combra Diaz, and then the fourth sphere was Ephron, and then the fifth sphere was Rogel Dorn, right?
It's Ifrid.
Or Efreed, sorry. I don't know why I can't remember his name, but that's the pattern, right? Those are the commanders, if I recall right.
Yeah, so wherever Yonad would be placed, because they could shuffle him around anyway.
I think they would have, but
where they put him, he'd probably do a better job than the other ones.
So if it was,
he's had longer command and knows how to command vast amount
right
at one time.
So if it was me as Rogel Dorn, anyways, I'd probably put Alexis Pollux at the first sphere, and the second sphere I'd put Yonad, because that's where, anyways, most of the people are coming in, and that was one of the bigger ones.
Yeah,
well, actually, the biggest one was, I think, the third sphere, because you had to deal with Mars with that one.
Yeah, so
maybe put him there,
the second or the third sphere.
So with Alexis Pollux, though, at the first sphere, anyways, with his void battle experience, anyways, do you think he actually beats Little Horus?
Possibly.
See, to me, that drastically changes things. Because, as we know, anyways, Sigismund was a great warrior. But when it comes to void, like you said before, anyways, if you had to pick, anyways, somebody to watch your back, and you said, well, in a void battle, there's no comparison, I would take Alexis Pollux.
Right.
And that's where they get into combat, anyways, is a void battle. So if he does kill Little Horus, what do you think? How do you think that changes things?
It changes things a lot, because that's one of the mournable.
Right. Well, not only that, but the concept that if he can take out Little Horus, that is the commander of the first sphere, the enemies of the first sphere coming in. So then, therefore, if he takes him out, they don't retreat there. They probably advance, right? They've taken out the leader, anyways, these guys that are coming in. So therefore, anyways, they can hold the first sphere even longer, which means that the solar war lasts longer, which in turn means, anyways, the siege of Terra doesn't take place anyways. When it does, it takes place later, which means maybe the whole thing with the Vengeful Spirit actually doesn't even take place. Because by that point,
Gilliman
Gilliman has shown up. Exactly. It's an interesting concept. Oh, I kind of like it.
So we can all blame Sigismund. Got it.
Exactly. This is all Siggy's fault. Well, okay. So, well, hang on half a second. So, if we're going to take that, so we kind of agree on that, though, anyways. What would happen if Alexis Polsk stayed behind, right?
Right.
Okay. So, let's say that he doesn't, though. The guy that stays behind is Yonad, right? But Alexis Pollux continues on with Sigismund with the Retribution fleet. Neither of them die. And then there's the Battle of Fall, right? That's the next thing that takes place. First off, do you think anyways they would have done as well in the Battle of Fall with Sigismund in charge or worse?
First of all, I think Sigismund would be trying to escape Fall to begin with.
Okay, I disagree. And here's my reason why. If Alexis Pollux is there, I disagree. I wholeheartedly agree with you if he's not there. If he's not there, Sigismund, as you know, anyways, his is kind of smash, let's get at him.
Know it.
But with Alexis Pollux there, I think Alexis Pollux actually might have been able to convince Sigismund, we need to stay behind and drill because battle is coming to us and we need to prepare for that. I mean, don't count out your boy too much. Alexis Pollux really, I think, did have, like you said, anyways, he didn't talk much, but when he did, anyways, people did tend to listen because he had that kind of very calm, wizened voice in the background. I mean, who doesn't listen to Barry White? I mean,
the problem that I have with that, though, is that even when he was there, many of them were constantly pushing him to leave. So it wouldn't just be him giving that opinion. There'd be other people that'd be on the opposite side.
Right. But like I said, anyways, I think that if Alexis Pollux was there, I think that he could have had enough of Sigismund's ear anyways that they would have stayed behind.
And then that also comes to when it comes to tactics too. Different types of tactics between Pollux and Sigismund.
Right. So what I'm saying is that I think anyways the Battle of Fall would have taken place. Now, what would have taken place at the Battle of Fall, I think would be drastically different if Sigismund's running the thing.
Because he'd probably run it the way that
he runs everything.
Perturabo thought that they were going to run it.
He was going to. Exactly.
They would have suffered a heck of a lot more.
You think they would have lost a lot more people? I kind of agree with you. Now let's say anyways, though, that they both end up escaping like they did anyways in the Battle of Fall anyways. Well, Alexis Pollux escapes. Let's say anyways Sigismund does too anyways, and they end up in the Imperium Secundus with Gilliman and whatnot. Well, first off, anyways, Gilliman, there wouldn't be that awkward conversation where Gilliman's like, I know you, right? You're Phil. I'm Alexis. Right, Alexis.
No, instead he'd just be like, Sigismund.
Yeah, exactly.
And
your entourage
over here, and completely ignore Pollux.
Sigismund, you've come to us with your entourage. Yes. But how do you think first off, anyways, do you think anyways that Alexis Pollux would ever become friends with Barabbas at that point? Because I don't think anyways Gilliman would put him in charge. I think he put Sigismund in charge because it's Sigismund.
I can still see him doing that.
Becoming friends with Barabbas?
Yeah. I think that the leader of the Ultramarines, not Gilliman, but the leader of the Ultramarines, wouldn't get nearly as much credit.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about. I can't remember his name, but yeah. I think it would have drastically changed the dynamics, though, between that friendship. I don't think they would have been nearly as close, just simply because, I mean, he's not in charge. He's not, he didn't have to directly, a lot of times, probably deal with Barabbas as opposed to Sigismund, who would be taking that up.
Actually, on the other hand, it may not have changed as much as you think because of how unbending Sigismund would be towards Iron Warriors. He'd probably go, you deal with this guy. I'm not.
Okay, good point. Yeah. Even though Rabute Gilliman tells us that we have to work with him, doesn't mean that I have to like it. In fact, you know what? I'm not going to work with him. You work with him. Okay, so now we've come full circle. Anyways, we go back to the concept. That the siege of Terra. Anyways, if Yonad is there, I'm thinking that even without Alexis Pollux, I think that okay. Let's say that Alexis Pollux stayed behind anyway. Sigismund does this whole thing. He fights in the Battle of Fall, and he gets thrashed by Perturabo. And then he ends up anyways in the Imperium Secundus, and that whole thing takes place. But then they get there earlier than what happens before. So what do you think ends up taking place then? So Gilliman, his Ultramarines, and Sigismund has shown up, and they've shown up before the Emperor can go into the Vengeful Spirit. They have shown up before the fall of the Siege of Terra. So what do you think takes place then?
A massive thrashing.
You think that they just completely and utterly annihilate pretty much the forces of chaos from behind them and
Oh, I think they'd start eating away at I think they would force a retreat.
I agree with you. Now, if that does take place anyways, what happens to the two people that we've been talking about, Alexis Pollux and Sigismund? Personally, I think Alexis Pollux's situation kind of ends up, I would say kind of ends up being the same, but at the same time, if the Emperor doesn't end up fighting Horus, then the Emperor's still around.
Right.
So the Codex Astartes doesn't take place. Ooh. That would be interesting.
It would be like Gilliman hands up this piece of paper. I think we can do this. That might solve the problem.
You dare threaten my authority? Ooh. Well, I guess this might work. Very well. Make it so. Why don't you try it with your Ultramarines first? We'll see if it works there.
I don't know. To me, anyways, that's interesting because, that doesn't end the Horus heresy. Because it forces Horus to retreat, which means that Horus is still around and the Emperor is still around. So if he forces a retreat, I would assume the Emperor, I might be wrong about this, but I assume the Emperor anyways starts the great scouring pretty much, right?
Right.
He starts an immediate attack anyways, and he sends his forces out to kill Horus after they've had that brutal defeat. So does that mean anyways they all end up back in the Eye of Terror, and then the Emperor goes back and tries to fix the One-Plate Project of the Golden Throne that Magnus screwed up so badly? Or does he take a sabbatical? Or
I don't know.
Does he follow him into the Eye of Terror? I don't know. It drastically changes things, though. That's the thing that I find interesting is that if
maybe he sits on the Golden Throne, but this case you can actually talk to people and eat. And
the thing that I find interesting about this is that while we have talked about how Sigismund is like this very important, he's probably the greatest Imperial Fist ever. To me, anyways, the more key thing that is very interesting is whether or not, anyways, Pollux stays behind or not. Because, like we mentioned, anyways, if he stays behind, there's a very good chance that he actually kills little Horus, in which case the Siege of Terra does not take place until later, which means that Rabute Gilliman and his forces come in sooner.
Especially with Yonad also there.
Yeah. So to me, anyways, it's fairly interesting because the choice that Sigismund makes, anyways,
screws everything up.
Yeah, kind of does.
Because wasn't also the person that ended up on the phalanx sent there via...
No, that's Garville Loken that did that whole thing. But, of course, then again, anyways, it could also very well be, anyways, that he decides to go on the Retribution fleet and he gets killed like Yonad, which means that nobody lives, anyways, through the Battle of Fall, which, how does that affect things? Ironically, not much.
Yeah.
Think about it. So, ironically, this is all Sigismund's fault. That's really what it can boil down to. If you want to know, anyways, who was to blame for the whole Siege of Terra and the Emperor, anyways, getting horribly wounded and Horus dying and everything like that, just blame Sigismund. And on that terrible note, we are out of time. Now, join us next week as we start our 2-month program on probably the most important people of the Imperium, which would be
the Astra Militarum, formerly known as the Imperial Guard.
Indeed. And maybe, anyways, in a couple months, we might get Sacrona back. I don't know at this point. But Thank you all for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this box. Feel free to like, follow, subscribe, and comment. And don't forget to check out the shop. We got some cool stuff there like clothes, pillows, and hats. And Yuksen's personal favorite, the bears. And mine, the
Bears.
Indeed. Now, if you really enjoyed this program, feel free to join our membership program on our YouTube channel, Tales of Asherock. Now, y'all have a great day. And as always,
Until next time, this is Zeckthar,
And Yuksen.
signing off.